The Midnight Society are a diverse group of kids who don't go to the same school, live in the same town, or even like the same things, but what brings them together is the dark. I don't know how they hooked up in the pre-internet era, but it had to have been through classifieds or something. They fill out the stereotypes pretty well. Gary, the nerd, Eric and David, the wimps, Kristen and Sam, the hot girls, Frank, the jock, and Kiki, the tomboy. In later episodes, adding Tucker, Gary's younger brother that's forced into the group by the overriding decision of their mom, who in turn initiates Stig, the typical smelly gross guy character that gives women second thoughts about swinging the other way. I felt it was necessary to dedicate an entire video to them because they weren't just tools used to introduce the latest tale. Admittedly, what they did was always relevant to the episode, but it was done in a way that was almost a self-contained story within a story. A good example is from The Dangerous Soup, an episode dealing with the manifestation of people's fears. The kids around the campfire discuss what scares them, and when it gets to Tucker, he starts acting like a Billy Badass by saying that nothing does. So Frank challenges him to put his hand inside a box containing something mysterious to prove it, but Tucker chickens out and runs off. It's revealed that what was in the box was exactly what Tucker was afraid of.
Nothing.
After watching every show of the first iteration, I've discovered a formula that they use in almost every episode. Whoever's telling the story gives a brief summary of what their tale is going to be about, and then the rest of them give each other a look that's like, "Aw shit, things are about to get real up in here." The stories deal with things from aliens to zombies and almost everything in between, even having the occasional recurring character. First there's Mr. Sardo.
That's Sardo. No, mister. Accent on the toe.
A character in Gary's stories that bears a striking resemblance to Jon Lovitz. He's a slimy businessman who lives and dies by the Latin phrase caveat emptor, so much so that he should probably tattoo it across his forehead. He sells junk to gullible kids without learning the item's intended use just to make a quick buck. Like a trio of magic tiny doors that are somehow linked together, or a pair of X-ray specs that can see into a parallel dimension where people in black morph suits have formed a pickup game of basketball. Sardo usually acts like an expert until the item's actual purpose is discovered and comes back to bite him on the ass. But what he really knows is fake vomit.
Have you seen our vomit? Have you seen our vomit? Have you seen our vomit?
Then there's Dr. Vink, who was exclusively in Frank's stories. And before you ask, no, he didn't play Hagrid in the Harry Potter movies. Unlike Sardo, who makes a comfortable living by peddling useless crap to clueless kids, Vink is a jack of all trades, spending most of his time as a master chef, a barber, and, as far as I know, the world's only collector of wild boar brains. He's also the retired filmmaker who created the silent horror classic Nosferatu. At least that's what he claims, although I'm thinking it's more like the whole Beowulf and Grendel situation, where he's taking credit for other people's work that's in the public domain. These two recurring characters actually appeared together in a two-part episode told jointly by Gary and Frank called The Tale of Cutter's Treasure. It's definitely one of the more ambitious episodes in the series in terms of production value and effects, even going so far as to get the respected stage and screen actor Charles S. Dutton. As I've said earlier, I've seen all of the first iteration and consider myself a big fan of the series. I'm sure that's blatantly obvious considering I dedicated 13 whole days to it. But when the main cast grew up and moved on, I really fell out of love with it. By then, Tucker had taken the reins as the post-pubescent leader of the Midnight Society. By this point, I liked Tucker more when he played a stoner in Half-Baked or a horny teenager hitting on Lindsay Lohan in Mean Girls. I mean, I've never seen Mean Girls. What's Mean Girls? Plus, in the newer Are You Afraid of the Dark, he brought in his own set of friends who I didn't care for all that much.
Check out this, Eddie. Hello, Maggie, did you hear? They landed a man on the moon!
But there was one last hurrah for Gary when he reappeared for the three-part special titled The Tale of the Silver Sight. Episodes centered entirely around the death of Gary and Tucker's grandpa and his dying wish to reassemble a broken record and find the location of a charm called the Silver Sight. It's one that I didn't watch when it was new because I didn't care about the series anymore, but have watched it recently and think it holds up pretty well. It even has the show's co-creator DJ McHale returning as the writer. But overall, after 25 years, the series has legs and a real staying power. Despite the tacky 90s clothes and the goofy hair, Are You Afraid of the Dark has a timeless charm. There are way more people who look back fondly on this show than others of the time, such as Wienerville, Roundhouse, or even, dare I say, The Adventures of Pete and Pete. It even appeals to young newcomers to this day.
That's all, I'm gone.
That does it for this year, but who knows what'll happen next October. Maybe I'll cover more episodes, or maybe I'll move on to something else. Either way, let me leave you with the astute and enlightened words of Eric.
I got a cramp.
I declare this series of videos on Are You Afraid of the Dark closed.